On the morning of my husband Daniel's funeral, I was standing beside his casket pretending to be stronger than I felt when my phone began to vibrate in my purse. I almost ignored it. Who answers a call during a funeral? But something, maybe instinct, maybe dread, made me step outside the chapel and look at the screen. It was Harold Bennett, Daniel's private attorney. He never called me directly. When I answered, his voice was low and urgent. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sorry to do this today, but you need to see something. Immediately. Before anyone else does." Before I could ask what he meant, he added quietly, "Please don't discuss this with Ethan." My heart stuttered. An hour later, I was sitting in Harold's office. He locked the door behind me and lowered his voice to a whisper. "Your son cannot know about this." Then he slid a thick folder across the desk. The first page made my hand start to shake. It was a property transfer form, signed in my name, dated 3 days after Daniel died. I never signed it. I don't remember walking back into the chapel. I remember the smell of lilies, the low murmur of polite grief, the way sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted the carpet in soft blue and gold. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Daniel would have hated this kind of ceremony. He used to joke that if anyone put lilies near him, he'd come back just to complain about the smell. But there he was. Still. Silent. Untouchable. Ethan stood near the front, greeting guests like a host at a corporate event instead of a son burying his father. His hand rested firmly on my elbow when I approached, guiding me more than supporting me. "You should sit down, Mom," he said gently, too gently. "You've had a long morning." Before I could respond, Lydia appeared at his side. Perfect black dress. Perfect mascara. Not a streak out of place. "We've taken care of everything," she added smoothly. "You don't need to worry about a thing. Taken care of everything." The words settled strangely in my chest. I hadn't been consulted about the flowers, or the music, or the guest list. Daniel and I had talked about these things once, in that half-serious way couples do when mortality feels far away. He wanted Sinatra playing softly. Instead, there was a string quartet performing something somber and forgettable. Even the photo displayed beside his casket wasn't one I would have chosen. It was from Ethan's graduation, Daniel beaming with pride, hand clapped on our son's shoulder. Not a single photo of just the two of us. Not one from our 40th anniversary cruise. Not one from the backyard garden he loved. It was subtle, but it felt deliberate. Halfway through the service, I noticed something else. Ethan kept checking his phone. Not once or twice. Constantly. His thumb moved quickly across the screen, jaw tightening, relaxing, tightening again. Lydia leaned in occasionally, whispering into his ear. Each time she did, he nodded in short, decisive movements. This wasn't grief. This was coordination. When the pastor invited me to say a few words, Ethan stood quickly. "Mom's not up for that," he announced before I could speak. A few sympathetic murmurs floated through the room. I stared at him. "I am," I said quietly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You don't have to." "I want to." For a split second, something flashed across his face, irritation? Panic? But it vanished just as quickly. He stepped aside. As I stood at the podium, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I spoke about Daniel's kindness, his terrible golf swing, the way he burned toast every Sunday morning but insisted on making breakfast anyway. When I looked at Ethan, he wasn't listening. He was texting. After the service ended and guests began drifting toward the reception hall, Ethan pulled me aside. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, "we should probably meet with the estate planner this week. Just to simplify things." Simplify things. "Your father just passed," I replied. "I know. That's exactly why we need to stay ahead of paperwork." Paperwork. My husband wasn't even in the ground yet. "I can handle it," he continued. "You don't need that kind of stress." Lydia squeezed my hand. "We just want to protect you." Protect me? From what? I glanced toward the chapel doors, toward the parking lot, toward the direction of Harold Bennett's office across town. The folder. The forged signature. The date. 3 days after Daniel died. I looked back at my son. For the first time in my life, a quiet, unwelcome thought slipped into my mind. What exactly were they trying to stay ahead of? And why did my protection sound so much like control? I waited until the reception was underway before I slipped out. No one stopped me. That, more than anything, unsettled me. Ethan had been hovering all morning, guiding, redirecting, speaking for me. But when I picked up my purse and told Lydia I needed air, she simply nodded. "We'll be here," she said. "Don't overexert yourself." Overexert. As if walking to my own car required supervision. Harold Bennett's office was only 15 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. My hands tightened around the steering wheel at every red light. I kept hearing his voice in my head, "Before anyone else does." When I arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Harold was waiting just inside the glass doors. He didn't offer his usual warm handshake. He didn't even smile. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. His tone told me this wasn't routine. Inside his office, everything looked the same as it always had. Shelves of leather-bound volumes, framed degrees, the faint scent of coffee and paper. Familiar. Safe. Until he closed the door and locked it. The click of the bolt sliding into place sounded louder than it should have. I turned to face him. "Harold, what is going on?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked behind his desk and picked up the thick folder I had seen earlier. "I need you to brace yourself," he said. "I buried my husband this morning," I replied. "I don't think there's much left that can shock me." He hesitated. Then he opened the folder. The first document was the property transfer form I had already seen, transferring full ownership of our home to Ethan Whitmore. Signed in my name. Notarized. Dated 3 days after Daniel's death. "I never signed that," I said again. "I know," Harold replied. He slid another document toward me. This one was worse. A revised version of Daniel's will, electronically filed 2 days after his death. In it, the majority of his assets were reallocated. A new clause cited my declining cognitive condition as justification for transferring financial control to my son. I stared at the words. Declining cognitive condition. What is that supposed to mean? Harold removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It means someone submitted medical documentation claiming you are experiencing early-stage dementia." The air seemed to leave the room. "That's insane." "Yes," he agreed calmly. "It is." He handed me copies of the attached documents. There were medical evaluation forms, bearing the name of a physician I had never seen. Notes describing memory lapses, disorientation, impaired financial judgment. I felt heat rush to my face. "I had my annual physical 4 months ago," I said. "My doctor said I'm in excellent health." "I verified that," Harold replied. "These records did not come from your primary physician." A chill crept up my spine. How were they submitted? Electronically. Through a private portal. The IP address traces back to a residential network. My mouth went dry. Whose network? He held my gaze. Ethan's home. For a moment I couldn't process the words. They felt abstract. Detached from reality. "You're saying my son forged medical records and my signature to take control of my finances?" "I'm saying," Harold replied carefully, "that someone using your son's home internet connection submitted falsified documentation designed to establish you as legally incompetent." Legally incompetent. The word echoed. "And that's not all." He reached into the folder again. 3 months ago, Daniel came to me with concerns. He noticed irregular withdrawals from a joint investment account. My stomach dropped. "How much?" $240,000. Over time. Structured to avoid automatic alerts. I felt suddenly cold. He suspected Ethan? He didn't want to believe it, Harold said. But he hired a forensic accountant anyway. My vision blurred slightly. Why didn't Daniel tell me? Harold's expression softened. He was trying to protect you. There it was again. Protect. From what? I whispered. Harold's jaw tightened. From exactly what you're looking at now. He closed the folder slowly. Margaret, your husband believed someone was preparing to declare you unfit to manage your own affairs. I sat back in the chair, my pulse loud in my ears. And once that happened? I asked. Harold didn't hesitate. Everything would move very quickly. Silence filled the room. Outside, a car passed on the street. Normal life. Ordinary afternoon. Inside that office, my entire reality had shifted. I thought of Ethan at the funeral. The texting. The urgency about paperwork. Staying ahead of things. I looked up at Harold. What happens next? I asked. He didn't soften his answer. That depends on whether you're ready to fight your own son. I didn't answer Harold right away. Fight my own son? The words felt unnatural. Like they belonged in someone else's life. A courtroom drama, not mine. There has to be some explanation, I said finally. A misunderstanding. Maybe Ethan was trying to help with the accounts. Harold didn't argue. He simply reached back into the folder. 3 months ago, he said, Daniel requested a confidential review of your joint financial records. Not through our firm. Through an independent forensic accountant. He slid a stapled report across the desk. I forced myself to read. Line after line documented withdrawals, small enough to avoid triggering automatic alerts, large enough to accumulate quickly. 7,000 here. 12,000 there. 15,000 labeled as consulting fees. Total. $240,380. My vision tunneled. Where did it go? Primarily into a shell LLC formed 8 months ago. I swallowed. Owned by. Harold met my eyes. Lydia Whitmore. It felt like something inside my chest cracked open. No, I whispered. Yes. The room seemed too quiet. Harold turned to another section of the file. There's more. I didn't want there to be more. He pressed a small digital recorder on his desk. Daniel came to see me the day after he confronted Ethan. My head snapped up. He confronted him? Yes. Harold pressed play. The recording wasn't perfect, slightly muffled, clearly captured discreetly, but I recognized Daniel's voice immediately. Calm. Controlled. I just want you to tell me the truth, son. A pause. Then Ethan. Defensive. Sharper than I'd ever heard him speak to his father. It's my inheritance anyway. Why does it matter if I access it now? The air left my lungs. Daniel's voice again. Strain now. It matters because your mother is still alive. Another pause. Then Ethan lower. She doesn't even know what day it is half the time. My hand flew to my mouth. That wasn't concern. That was positioning. The recording ended. Silence flooded the office. I don't forget what day it is, I said faintly. I know you don't, Harold replied gently. Daniel knew that too. I stared at the desk, seeing not wood grain but every school play, every scraped knee, every Christmas morning Ethan had ever experienced under our roof. Where had that boy gone? Harold cleared his throat. There's one final piece you need to understand. I braced myself. After that meeting, Daniel insisted on adding a protective clause to his estate. He handed me another document, notarized, dated 6 weeks before Daniel's death. It was titled, Contingency Asset Freeze Provision. If any modifications are attempted to the estate, beneficiary designations, or financial control within 30 days following my death, Harold read, all primary assets will automatically transfer into a protective trust pending investigation. I blinked. He expected this, I said. He feared it, Harold corrected. My throat tightened. He didn't tell me. He didn't want to frighten you unless he had proof. Proof. My eyes drifted back to the medical forms claiming I was cognitively impaired. Was there anything else? I asked quietly. Harold hesitated, just enough for me to notice. There was an insurance policy adjustment. I felt numb now, like my emotions had hit capacity. What kind of adjustment? Daniel removed Ethan as sole beneficiary 2 weeks before he passed. My head lifted slowly. Who did he name instead? You. A sharp, fragile laugh escaped me. So I'm not incompetent enough to inherit? Harold didn't smile. There's an additional stipulation. Of course there was. If you are declared legally incapacitated at the time of payout, the funds transfer to a long-term care conservatorship, managed by a court-appointed guardian. And who petitioned to initiate that review? I asked, already knowing. Harold's silence answered me. The strategy became horrifyingly clear. Declare me unfit. Gain financial control. Sell the house. Access the insurance. Accelerate everything. My fingers began to tremble. This can't be real, I said. Ethan wouldn't. Harold leaned forward slightly. Margaret, I need you to consider something difficult. I looked up. Your husband did not die unaware. The words hung between us. What are you implying? I'm saying, Harold replied carefully, that Daniel believed pressure was escalating. Pressure. Financial pressure. A memory surfaced. Daniel mentioning Ethan's new investment. Something about cryptocurrency. Volatility. Risk. How much debt? I asked quietly. Harold exhaled. Approximately $300,000. The number landed like a physical blow. And rising. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. My husband had been investigating our son. My son had been preparing to declare me incompetent. And I had spent the morning accepting condolences from people who thought I was simply a grieving widow. I lowered my gaze. What do you need from me? I asked. Harold's voice was steady now. Professional. I need to know whether you want to activate the protective trust immediately. That meant confrontation. That meant exposure. That meant accepting that the boy I raised might have seen me not as his mother, but as an obstacle. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, something inside me had shifted. Yes, I said. Activate it. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral began, I wasn't shaking from grief. I was shaking from clarity. Harold made the call while I was still sitting in his office. I listened as he instructed his assistant to initiate the contingency asset freeze provision. His tone was calm, procedural, the kind of voice you use when filing routine paperwork. But nothing about this was routine. Effective immediately, he said. All primary assets are to be transferred into the Whitmore Protective Trust pending formal review. He hung up and looked at me. It will trigger notifications, he explained. Bank accounts. Estate filings. Insurance. To Ethan, I said. Yes. The room felt smaller. How long before he knows? Minutes. As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I stood and walked toward the window instead, staring down at the quiet street below. Ordinary cars. Ordinary people. No one had any idea that my life had just split into a before and after. Before I knew, and after I knew, Harold joined me near the window. There's something else you should understand, he said. I turned to face him. The forensic accountant didn't just trace withdrawals. Of course he didn't. He traced liabilities. My stomach tightened. How bad? Harold returned to his desk and opened a secondary file, thinner, but somehow more ominous. Ethan invested heavily in speculative crypto assets 18 months ago. Initially, he saw short-term gains. Enough to believe he understood the market. I almost smiled at that. Daniel had warned him. Then the market corrected, Harold continued. Sharply. How much did he lose? On paper? Nearly $500,000. The number rang in my ears. But losses aren't always realized, Harold added. He doubled down. Borrowed against future earnings. Took out private loans. With what collateral? Harold's eyes held mine. Projected inheritance. I felt heat flood my body. He promised money that wasn't his. Yes. And when the investments failed? He owed approximately $300,000 to private lenders. High interest. A slow dawning horror settled over me. That's why he needed access. Yes. And Lydia? Harold flipped to another page. The LLC receiving the diverted funds, Whitmore Strategic Holdings, was registered under Lydia's name. My hands clenched. She works in healthcare administration, I said slowly. She understands documentation. Yes, Harold replied evenly, including medical documentation. The pieces slid together with sickening precision. Fake cognitive reports, electronic filings, structured withdrawals. A petition for conservatorship drafted but not yet submitted. They were preparing everything, I whispered. Harold nodded. Once you were declared legally incompetent, Ethan would assume financial guardianship. The house could be sold to cover care expenses. Investment accounts liquidated. Insurance proceeds redirected under fiduciary authority. Fiduciary authority. Such a clean phrase for such a dirty act. And where would I be during all this? I asked. Harold didn't soften it. In a managed care facility. The word facility echoed in my mind like a cell door closing. I don't even have high blood pressure, I said faintly. He didn't respond. Because that wasn't the point. The point was speed. The point was control. The point was to move quickly enough that I wouldn't understand what was happening until it was already done. I thought back to the past year. Ethan insisting on driving me to appointments. Lydia offering to help organize my financial passwords. Subtle questions. Casual comments. Mom, you seem tired lately. Didn't you already tell me that story? Planting doubt. Not in others. In me. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not grief this time, not shock. Anger. Deep. Cold. Clarifying. Did Daniel suspect all of this? I asked. He suspected escalation, Harold replied. He believed the financial pressure was intensifying. A memory surfaced. 2 weeks before Daniel died, he had stood at the kitchen counter longer than usual, staring at nothing. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled and said, "Just thinking." He hadn't been thinking. He had been calculating, protecting, preparing. Why didn't he tell me? I asked again, though I already knew. Harold's voice softened. He believed confronting them openly would push them to act faster. And Daniel's heart had failed before the final move was made. Or had it? The thought slipped into my mind uninvited. Pushed it away. We don't have evidence of anything beyond financial misconduct, Harold said carefully, as if sensing the direction of my thoughts. Let's stay grounded in what we can prove. I nodded. Grounded. Prove. Facts. Not fear. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Ethan. 5 missed calls. A text message followed. Mom, why did the bank just freeze Dad's accounts? Another. Call me immediately. Then another. What did you do? I felt strangely calm. For the first time that day, I wasn't reacting. I was ahead. I turned the phone face down on Harold's desk. What happens now? I asked. We prepare, he said. There will likely be confrontation. Possibly legal pushback. From my son. Yes. I straightened my shoulders. All morning, people had treated me like fragile glass. Like something on the verge of breaking. They had no idea. I won't be intimidated, I said quietly. Harold studied me for a moment, reassessing. No, he agreed. I don't believe you will. As if summoned by fate itself, my phone rang again. Ethan. This time I answered. Mom, he snapped immediately, dispensing with any softness. Why are Dad's accounts locked? I held the phone steady. I think, I said calmly, that's something we should discuss in person. A pause. His breathing sharpened. What did you do? He demanded. I looked at Harold, then out the window, then back at the folder containing everything they thought I would never see. I protected myself, I said. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral began, I wasn't speaking as someone's widow. I was speaking as someone who had just discovered the truth, and was no longer afraid of it. I chose our dining room. If we were going to tear this family apart, we were going to do it at the same table where we'd once celebrated birthdays and Thanksgiving dinners. Ethan arrived first. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He walked in with his jaw tight and his phone still in his hand. "What did you do?" he demanded before the door had fully closed. Lydia followed behind him, slower, composed, observing. "I didn't do anything," I replied evenly. "Your father did." Ethan blinked. "What are you talking about?" I gestured toward the dining chair across from me. He didn't sit, so I stayed seated. Control is often about posture. "The accounts are frozen," he said. "The bank said something about a trust activation. That doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense," I said calmly. Lydia stepped forward. "Margaret, maybe there's been a misunderstanding." "Stop," I said, raising a hand. She fell silent. I slid the folder across the table. Ethan looked down at it but didn't touch it. "What is that?" "Proof." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Proof of what?" "Forgery, fraud, and a petition to declare me legally incompetent." The word incompetent hung in the air like smoke. Lydia's composure flickered for half a second. Ethan finally pulled out a chair and "Saturday, this is ridiculous," he said. "Who's filling your head with this?" "Harold Bennett." His eyes sharpened. "Of course." I opened the folder and turned it toward him. 3 days after your father died, someone filed a property transfer granting you full ownership of this house. He glanced at the document, then back at me. So it has my signature." He shrugged. "Maybe you signed it." "I did not." Silence. "You were grieving," he said carefully. "You might not remember." The manipulation was almost elegant. "Plant doubt. Gaslight gently. Make it sound compassionate." "I remember burying my husband," I said quietly. "I would remember signing away my home." Lydia shifted her weight. "This is a lot to process," she offered softly. "Maybe we should revisit this when emotions aren't so high." I ignored her. "There's more," I said. I handed him the medical evaluation forms. His eyes scanned them. "This is insane," he muttered. "You don't even have dementia." "I know that," I replied. He looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw it. Not confusion. Calculation. "You've been forgetting things," he said slowly. "You repeat stories. You misplace your keys. I am 67, not incapacitated." Lydia stepped in again. "Margaret, early cognitive decline can be subtle. Did you draft these?" I asked her directly. Her lips pressed together. "That's an accusation." "It's a question." Ethan slammed his palm against the table. "Enough." The sound echoed through the house. "You think I'd do this to you?" he demanded. I held his gaze. "Yes." The word landed heavier than any scream. For a moment he looked almost wounded. Then something inside him snapped. "It's my inheritance anyway," he burst out. "Dad was going to leave it to me. All of it." Daniel's voice from the recording echoed in my mind. "It matters because your mother is still alive. You are not entitled to my death," I said. The room went very still. Ethan stared at me as if I'd slapped him. "You don't understand how bad things are," he said, voice dropping. "I was trying to stabilize everything before it got worse. By declaring me mentally unfit? By protecting what's ours. What's yours?" I repeated. "Yes," he shot back. "You and Dad built this for me. For our family." "For our family," I said carefully. "Not for your debts." His face drained of color. There it was. Confirmation without confession. Lydia inhaled sharply. "Ethan." "No," he snapped at her. "Too late." I leaned forward slightly. "How much do you owe?" He didn't answer. "How much?" I repeated. Silence stretched. 300,000, he muttered finally. The number didn't shock me anymore. What shocked me was his tone. Not ashamed. Resentful. "You gambled with money you didn't have," I said. "It wasn't gambling. It was cryptocurrency. It was an investment. It was speculation." His jaw tightened. "I was going to fix it," he insisted. "Once the market rebounded." So you needed liquidity, I said. His eyes flicked toward the folder. You had no right to freeze those accounts. I had every right. You're making this worse. No, I said steadily. I'm stopping it. Lydia's composure finally cracked. You don't know what kind of people he owes, she blurted out. The words seemed to surprise even her. Ethan turned sharply. Lydia. What kind of people? I asked quietly. Silence. That told me enough. Private lenders. High interest. Little patience. You weren't protecting me, I said slowly. You were trying to outrun them. He didn't deny it. I felt something inside me fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet breaking. I raised you, I said. I taught you integrity. You taught me survival, he shot back. And you think this is survival? His eyes hardened. I think you're standing in the way. The words settled between us. Clear. Cold. Final. I stood. For years I had been the mediator. The peacemaker. The soft place for everyone to land. Not anymore. I am not an obstacle, I said. I am your mother. He looked away. And in that moment, I understood something devastating. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing the money. I will not withdraw the trust, I said. You can't be serious. I am. You'll ruin me. No, I replied quietly. You did that yourself. For a second I thought he might apologize. Might break. Might remember who he used to be. Instead he stood abruptly. You're making a mistake. I shook my head. No, Ethan, I said. For the first time in a long time I'm not. He stormed out. Lydia lingered just long enough to say, You don't understand the consequences. I met her eyes. Oh, I said softly. I understand them perfectly. The door closed. The house fell silent. And I realized something that hurt more than any document, any forged signature, any stolen dollar. My son hadn't just tried to take my money. He had already decided I was expendable. The official investigation began quietly. Harold filed formal motions regarding financial fraud, forged medical documentation, and unauthorized prescription modification. The pharmacy logs were subpoenaed. The physician portal access records were requested. Bank transfers were frozen under court review. Everything moved through channels. Professional. Methodical. Not emotional. That part was left to me. 3 days after the lending firm called, Ethan showed up at my door alone. He looked different. Not polished. Not controlled. Tired. There were shadows under his eyes I hadn't seen before. When I opened the door, he didn't try to come in. He just stood there. Mom, he said. His voice cracked slightly. For a brief, dangerous second, my heart responded automatically. That's my son. But then I remembered the forged signature. The medical forms. The altered prescription. The words, You're standing in the way. What do you want, Ethan? I asked. They're freezing everything, he said. The lenders. The accounts. I can't even move money to cover interest. That's not my responsibility. He flinched. I made mistakes, he admitted. Bad investments. I panicked. You committed fraud. He swallowed. I never meant for Dad to. He stopped himself. To what? The unfinished sentence hung between us. I never meant for this to go so far. He finished instead. But you let it, I said quietly. Silence. A car passed on the street. Ordinary life continuing. I need you to withdraw the complaint, he said. If the fraud charges stick, I could lose my license. Lydia could lose hers. So you did file them, I replied. He closed his eyes briefly. Mom, please. There it was. Not remorse. Damage control. You listed me as a guarantor on private debt, I said. Without my consent. I was going to fix it. You altered medical records. I didn't think it would escalate. You adjusted your father's prescription. His eyes snapped open. I didn't kill him. I didn't say you did. But I had thought it. And he knew it. Tears filled his eyes then, real ones this time. I would never hurt him, he said. I studied his face. Was that true? I believed he hadn't set out to kill his father. But I also believed he had been reckless enough not to care what the consequences might be. Desperation makes people reckless. You didn't need him dead, I said slowly. You just needed control. His shoulders sagged. I was drowning, he whispered. And you chose to push me under with you. He didn't argue. For a moment we just stood there. Mother and son separated not by distance but by truth. I can still fix this, he said finally. If you just... No, the word was calm. Certain. Final. You stopped being my son, I continued quietly, the day you decided my voice didn't matter. He stared at me as if I'd struck him. I was trying to survive. At my expense. His breathing grew uneven. You're going to let them destroy me? I'm not destroying you, I said. I'm refusing to save you from yourself. That was the difference. Parents protect children from harm. But at some point protecting becomes enabling. And I would not enable this. The silence stretched. Then something hardened in his expression. You think Dad trusted you more than me? He asked bitterly. I know he did. The words slipped out before I could soften them. Because they were true. Daniel had trusted me to survive this. He had trusted me to see clearly. Ethan gave a small humorless laugh. So that's it? 40 years of raising me, and you just cut me off. No, I said gently. You cut yourself off. His jaw tightened again. For a split second I saw anger flare, the same anger from the dining room, but it faded quickly, replaced by fear. They're talking about criminal charges, he said. I know. If that happens. He didn't finish. I understood. Prison. Public record. Disgrace. I won't interfere, I said. He stared at me as if hoping I would change my mind. I didn't. Finally he stepped back from the doorway. I hope this was worth it, he muttered. I held his gaze. It was. He turned and walked down the driveway without looking back. I closed the door gently. Not slammed. Not shaking. Just closed. And for the first time since Daniel collapsed in our kitchen, I felt something steady settle inside me. Not victory. Not relief. Resolve. I had lost my husband. I had nearly lost my home. And I had lost the version of my son I thought I knew. But I had not lost myself. And that mattered more than anything he had tried to take. The hearing was not dramatic. No shouting. No gasps. Just polished wood, filtered sunlight, and the quiet hum of consequence. Ethan sat at the defense table in a dark suit that didn't quite fit the way his old ones used to. Lydia sat beside him, composed but pale. Their attorney spoke in measured tones about financial misjudgment, clerical errors, and miscommunication. The words felt sterile. Harold's presentation did not. He laid out timelines, bank transfers, digital signatures, pharmacy access logs. The altered prescription dosage entered under Ethan's credentials at 10:42 p.m., the night before Daniel's collapse. I didn't look at Ethan when that timestamp appeared on the screen. I didn't need to. I already knew. The medical examiner had concluded Daniel's death was due to cardiac arrest complicated by medication mismanagement. Not homicide. Not intentional. But preventable. That word settled into the courtroom like dust. Preventable. The judge asked Ethan directly, "Did you alter the dosage?" A pause. A long one. "Yes, Your Honor." The air shifted. He did not admit malicious intent. He admitted pressure. He admitted panic. He admitted believing he understood the medication better than the prescribing physician. He admitted arrogance. Fraud charges moved forward. Medical board review pending. Civil liability for the loans affirmed. Solely his and Lydia's responsibility. My name was formally removed. When the gavel struck, it did not feel triumphant. It felt heavy. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Ethan avoided them. Lydia shielded her face. I walked past without answering questions. Grief is not a headline. The house felt different that evening. quieter than it had even after Daniel's funeral. The kind of quiet that follows a storm, not because the sky is clear, but because everything that could break already has. I walked into Daniel's study for the first time in weeks. His reading glasses were still on the desk, a bookmark halfway through a novel he would never finish, the faint scent of his aftershave lingering in the wood grain. I sat in his chair. "I did what you would have done," I said aloud. The room did not answer, but I didn't need it to. I had spent months questioning my instincts, wondering if I was overreacting, if grief was making me suspicious, if a mother's love required endless forgiveness. Doesn't. Love without boundaries is surrender. And I was done surrendering. Ethan called 2 days later. Not to argue. Not to plead. Just to inform. "The board suspended my license pending investigation," he said. I heard. A long silence followed. "They're recommending probation instead of prison," he added. "If I cooperate." "That's good." Another silence. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. This time I believed him. Intent and impact are not the same. "I know," I replied. He exhaled, shaky. "But you did." "Yes." He didn't defend himself. That at least was new. "They said Dad's condition was already fragile," he added. "That the dosage increase wasn't guaranteed to cause the arrest. But it increased the risk." "Yes." His voice cracked. "I just thought if he stabilized faster, we could refinance the property before you noticed the guarantor issue." There it was. The full truth. He hadn't tried to kill his father. He had tried to buy time. And in doing so, he had gambled with a life that wasn't his to gamble. "I noticed," I said. "I know." Another pause. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. Good. That startled him. "Forgiveness isn't a transaction," I continued. "It's a process. And we are nowhere near the beginning of it." He absorbed that. "Will you ever speak to me again?" he asked. "I'm speaking to you now." "That's not what I mean." I looked out the window at the maple tree Daniel planted the year Ethan was born. "I don't know," I answered honestly. And that was the truest thing I could offer. Weeks passed. The accounts were stabilized. The house was secure. The legal matters moved slowly through their channels. Neighbors stopped whispering. Reporters lost interest. Life, indifferent as ever, continued. I began volunteering at the hospital once a week, not in cardiology. I couldn't bear that hallway yet, but in patient advocacy, helping elderly patients understand consent forms, explaining medication changes, encouraging them to ask questions. "Your signature matters," I told them. "Your voice matters." I meant it more than they knew. One evening I stood in the backyard at sunset. The sky was streaked in soft orange and violet, the kind of quiet beauty Daniel used to call proof that the world keeps going. I missed him, not in the sharp, gasping way of the first weeks, but in the steady, permanent way that feels like a second heartbeat. Ethan sent a letter instead of calling next time. Handwritten, apologetic, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond. Not yet, but I kept it, because healing is not linear, and accountability does not erase blood. I may never have the son I thought I raised, but I have clarity, I have truth, and I have something stronger than fear now. I have myself, and that is what remains.